There is a moment that happens in silence. No argument, no confrontation, no visible crack in anything. The conversation looks the same. The responses are still coming. Everything on the surface appears intact, but something has already ended, and the person on the other side of it has no idea. Because the person who ended it didn't announce it, didn't explain it, didn't even fully decide it in the way decisions are usually made. It simply settled. Like a conclusion the body reached before the mind had words for it. If you have ever watched someone who seemed deeply present in your life gradually become unreachable, not dramatically, not cruelly, just quietly and completely, you have witnessed something most people never understand. Not because it is complicated, because it is invisible. And if you are the kind of person who has ever done this yourself, who has gone through the slow interior process of withdrawing from someone while still showing up for them on the outside, then you already know that what looks like distance from the outside feels like something else entirely from the inside. It feels like finally being honest. The world has a particular story about people who feel deeply, that they are reactive, that they wear everything on the surface, that emotion moves through them quickly, visibly, loudly. For some people, that is true. But there is another kind of deep feeling that works almost in reverse. Quiet on the outside, extraordinarily active on the inside. The kind that does not react to what just happened. The kind that tracks what keeps happening. That notices not the single moment, but the pattern the moments make when laid alongside each other. This is not a strategy. It is not calculation. It is simply how some minds are built, absorbing everything, filing it, holding it with a patience that looks like acceptance until the day it suddenly looks like nothing at all. The people around them often mistake the patience for permission, for evidence that everything is fine, for proof that the relationship can sustain what it has been sustaining. They are not wrong to miss it. The signals are interior. The processing happens in a place no one else has access to, but the conclusion, when it arrives, is total. Let's stay with what actually happens on the inside, because the inside is where all of it lives. Something arrives that doesn't match. Not dramatically, just a small gap between what was said and what was felt, between the version of the person being presented and the version that keeps showing up in the quieter moments. Between the warmth that appears when it's easy and the absence that appears when it costs something. A person who feels deeply does not file this away as evidence of anything yet. They hold it alongside everything else they know about this person, the good, the complicated, the generous, the afraid. They extend understanding because understanding is what they do, reflexively and genuinely, even when it is not extended back. But they notice, and then it happens again. A different shape, the same gap. The word that landed slightly wrong. The moment of need that went unmet in a way that was probably unintentional, but was felt completely. The pattern in how available someone is when they want something and how absent they become when the want is satisfied. Still no reaction. Still the same warmth on the surface. Still the same presence in the room. But inside, something has shifted from interpreting to seeing. And those are not the same thing. Interpreting requires hope. It reaches for explanations. It considers context. It asks what might be making someone behave this way and extends the benefit of that question over and over, because understanding is more natural than conclusion. Seeing has no hope attached to it. Seeing is simply what is, recognized clearly, without the filter of wanting it to be different. The moment that shift happens, quietly, without announcement, sometimes in the middle of an ordinary conversation, everything that follows is already determined. Here is the part that is almost impossible to explain to someone who hasn't lived it. The withdrawal that follows is not anger, it is not punishment, it is not even a decision exactly. Not the kind you make consciously, deliberately, with awareness of what you are doing. It is more like a door that closes from the inside on its own. The depth goes first. The conversation continues, but what is shared inside the conversation becomes smaller, more managed, more surface level. Not because anything was decided about what to share, because the part of the person that used to share freely has quietly moved further back, further from the edge where it could be reached or mishandled or spent on someone who would not know what to do with it. Then the mental space clears. The person stops living inside the other person's behavior, stops replaying, analyzing, wondering. The internal dialogue that used to orbit this relationship simply goes quiet. Not from resolution, not yet, but from something closer to neutrality. The mind stops investing energy in understanding something it has already understood. And finally, the behavior follows. Responses still come, but they are lighter. Presence is maintained, but it is functional rather than full. The emotional signature behind the words flattens, not into coldness, but into a kind of careful neutrality that looks, from the outside, almost exactly like everything being fine. Nothing is fine. Everything has already moved. This is why people are so often blindsided. Because by the time the physical distance appears, the slower responses, the shorter conversations, the gradual absence, the interior exit happened weeks or months before. What looks like a beginning is actually a conclusion. The person on the outside is reacting to a door that has already been closed for a very long time. There is something else that almost never gets said about this. The withdrawal is not only from the other person, it is from a version of themselves. Because the version that existed inside that relationship was a specific version. The one that overextended, overexplained, absorbed more than was sustainable, stayed longer than the evidence warranted because the capacity to understand someone makes it very hard to stop trying to understand them. That version gave in ways that were never balanced, offered depth into spaces that didn't know how to hold it, kept the door open long past the point when the patterns had already told them what they needed to know. That version doesn't come back. Not out of pride, not out of resentment, out of something quieter and more permanent. The simple impossibility of unknowing what has been known, of unseeing what has been seen, of returning to a state of uncertainty about something that is now completely clear. The clarity is not cruel. It is just final in the way that real clarity always is. So, what is this actually about? Underneath everything, it is about what happens to a person who has spent years being the one who understands, who reads every room, tracks every shift, absorbs every dynamic, and who has learned, slowly and expensively, that pouring all of that outward without anything returning eventually empties something that can only be refilled from within. The withdrawal is not rejection, it is return to the interior, to the self that got quieter and quieter while all of that energy was moving outward, to the emotional resources that were being spent faster than they were being restored, to the part of the person that knew, long before the mind caught up, that this particular connection was costing more than it was giving. When that reversal happens, when the attention that was always moving outward begins moving inward instead, something that looked like loss from the outside becomes something completely different from the inside. It becomes the first quiet in a very long time. You will not always know when this is happening. That is not a failure of perception. It is simply the nature of interior processes. They are not visible until they are complete, and by the time they are complete, the person you are watching has already moved somewhere you cannot follow unless they invite you there. The only thing that could have changed the outcome was not more effort, not more persistence, not more attempts to reconnect after the distance appeared. It was something earlier, something quieter, the willingness to meet depth with depth, to ask the question that didn't get asked often enough. Not how are you, but what are you actually carrying right now? to offer back a fraction of what was always being offered to you. That is what they were waiting for, not forever, but long enough. Some doors close so quietly you never hear them, not because the person behind them stopped caring, because they cared for so long, so deeply, so silently, that caring for themselves, finally, was the only thing left to do. I want to ask you something real. Have you ever gone through this, either as the person who withdrew, or the person who watched someone disappear and only understood why much later? Leave it in the comments. There is more to be said about this than most people have ever been given the words for.